you?
Hi.
Hello. Good afternoon. Well, it's good evening, actually, nearly, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Right.
it is.
So we are, yeah, we're just on time now. So how are you? Are you well?
Yeah, very well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, very well, thanks.
And you're in London, aren't you, Oksana? And you're in, is it Buckinghamshire, Rachel?
That's it, yeah, Buckinghamshire.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. So thank you for joining this evening. I can see that we've got people joining. Can you see on your screen as well when we get people come in?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the bottom. Brilliant. Excellent. So for the benefit of those people that have joined us and don't know about this series and the point of it, Biofutures is essentially a series of conversations with really seminal figures and those that are pioneering at the edge of biofutures in all its forms. So we've got experts from biomaterials, from biodesign, from biotechnology, and all the other bios. And today I'm really pleased that we're joined by two experts, I think it's fair to say, in designing with fungi. Those that watched our last session will know that we explored how we grow the future, but in that session we looked at how we grow the future with plants, with trees. So today we're actually going to look particularly at fungi, although obviously this applies more generally to growing with living systems. And I thought we might start off really with just a brief intro to both of you. Obviously, Oksana, you are design director over at Biohm, and you're also the co-founder of the Lunar Lab, which does some really interesting design work. And obviously, Rachel, you are the founder of Urban Fungarium. I saw you're actually a concert standard harpist as well. You've got a bit of a folio, but I thought, ladies, if you just tell the people that are joining us just a little bit about yourself, a mini bio, as it were.
Yeah. Shall I go first?
You go first.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me as part of this series. I think it's really important to have these conversations. So I'm really pleased to be here. I'm Oksana, I'm Director of Design at Biohm. I guess a little bit about Biohm. We are a research and development led biomanufacturing company. We're just over 5.5 years old, so young and fresh, but I guess kind of established a little bit of a pioneer in the industry of bio-based materials and working with waste streams and for the construction industry. So our mission is to only have regenerative impact on everything that we touch. And I guess at the core of all of our inspiration is nature, because we feel that there is no better place to search for inspiration and find solutions to the challenges that we all face today than the natural world. And I guess maybe a little bit about me or my role at Biohm, or what?
Absolutely, about you. What does design director at Biohm involve?
Wow, yeah, it involves quite a lot of things. Obviously, we are a relatively small team. We're just around 16 people. So as a director of design, it involves quite a lot of things, but because we do really deeply believe in design and the power of it, we kind of apply the design thinking across various areas of, from developing innovative business models to the way we set up our biomanufacturing facilities, to the way we innovate, and obviously to the way we design. So from product development to everything around it, I guess all the ecosystems. So I guess that's me and Biohm.
And what about Lunar Lab? Tell us a little bit about the Lunar Lab. What happens there?
Yeah, Lunar Lab is something I have started just shortly before I joined Biohm. So very similar kind of philosophy and ethos is to try and design out waste. And apply the design thinking as a problem-solving tool. But primarily Lunar Lab focuses on a particular waste stream, like bio waste. whereas Biohm works across a whole wide range of portfolio of waste streams and has a wider range of technologies in the toolbox. Luna Lab is very much focused on one technology and one waste stream.
Brilliant. And Rachel, tell us a bit about you.
Sorry, I changed location. So I am a designer. I graduated from Goldsmiths about 5 years ago. But I don't know, maybe like other makers, I kind of struggled having studied about producing more into the world, and I thought I have to do this in a sustainable way, and that's where I got sort of hooked on mushrooms. Not on that.
That's what you say.
in a materially passionate way. Yes, and I'm also a harp, so yeah, I do play. Try to keep my gigs as wacky as possible, which is fun. But yeah, from a material perspective, the most inspiring designers and makers for me are people who are as transparent as possible and as sustainable as possible, and I aspire to be like that. So that's where my passion comes from. And I am the founder of Urban Fungarium, which is a conversation and also material and sort of artwork into biofuture design, and I've got a lot of passion. But yeah, the Urban Fungal was initially a project that came out of university. Grow your own beautiful kind of like macrame handmade hanging basket situation to try and sort of sneak in mushrooms into people's homes under the guise of, you know, a trendy and coming kind of thing to have in your home, because people still have this sort of stigma against mushrooms. But I thought this is an attractive aquarium type thing. Maybe will people get on board with that? And so yeah, and so from then on, I've just sort of been growing mushrooms and continued designing while playing harp, basically.
Brilliant. So both of you, I mean, a common theme that I've been finding with those that are working in biodesign is that they're often working across a number of different areas. So they're what I call a folio professional. They've got, you know, not one activity, but they've got a few. Sometimes they are very synchronized. Other times they are seemingly desperate, such as obviously, Rachel, you've got your research as a designer, as a researcher in materials with fungi, and then you've got your music. But obviously there will be crossovers with that, won't there? Because they're both inherently creative and exploratory in nature. So that's one of the themes. And also, you know, it's always interesting how people get involved with growing, as it were, design, as opposed to making it in the more traditional sense. What is it that really drew you to this area? What is it that sparked your interest in biodesign? Oksana, if you kick us off with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think on the first point, you know, being involved in quite maybe similar or even sometimes opposite disciplines or type of activity. I think that's some people obviously struggle with that, but there is a particular kind of people that thrive in that environment, and actually because they are able to understand that there is a cross-pollination, and you know, also when you are trying to work with problems or solving the most challenging problems that we face as a society, that cross-pollination and thinking in systems rather than focusing on one particular thing is essential, because without doing that, it would be really difficult. So I think maybe that's where the cross-pollination of being involved in a few different things at the same time actually is beneficial to one another. I don't know, Rachel, if you agree.
No, definitely. I definitely agree. I also think what just came to my mind, trying.
Rachel, your connection's a little bit poor. I think you need to move your mobile a little bit to get the Wi-Fi signal a bit better, because you're breaking in and out a little bit.
Oh, it should be. It says 3 bars. How's that?
That's perfect there. Yeah, now you've moved it. You're really clear.
Okay. I was just thinking that when you said that, Oksana, I was thinking sometimes being sustainable as possible as a designer, or trying to be, can be quite stressful. And so perhaps I moved to harp to try and calm that kind of worry. But then I end up putting myself in sort of stressful performance situations, so maybe that doesn't always work. But yeah, I think there's an inherent need, isn't there, for designers now. We can't just think about creating. We've got to think about the end product before we start making, if we want to be sustainable. That's definitely one of my core passions. Yeah.
Interest. So for both of you, it was very much the bigger perspective, as it were, that drew you to biodesign, in effect, into biomaterials. It was thinking about sustainability, about the issues we've got to tackle, and it was thinking about the fact that in order to do that, we've got to look at systems which inherently draws you to the recyclability and the general as it were, place of materials in our world, and the fact we've got to tackle this throwaway culture. So I wondered, you know, working with living materials obviously has a very different quality to working with that which is inert. What are the things that have really surprised you as designers about working with fungi?
This is the best, like one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think actually we didn't maybe answer one of your questions before, how we got involved in the biodesign, I guess. Yeah. For me personally, it's facing drastic problems and not wanting to just continue business as usual and just indulge in being designer and create beautiful things. I had to solve it, right? So it became a personal mission, and here we are. But it started by working with inert matter, like you're saying, whether it was bioplastic or waste streams. But when it comes to mycelium or fungi and working with a living organism, that's where it absolutely blows my mind. And I think it's incredible because, like you say, it's a living, breathing, growing organism. And I personally feel I feel honored that, you know, I'm allowed to work with it and create with it. And the kind of dynamic that it creates, it's like they don't teach you at university this kind of techniques and understanding of what actually is happening. It's not you just manipulating or casting it into the mold or whatever, or injection mold or molding it. It's you collaborating with it, because something, I don't know, Rachel, if you would agree or not, but if you think you're a master of mycelium, you're not. At the end of the day, in a lot of ways, it might want to do what it wants to do, but that's the beautiful thing. And I think the sooner, as a designer, well, when I realized that, when I really appreciated what was happening, the kind of relationship we were having, then that kind of eliminates the world of opportunities and innovation for a designer as well, because you need to almost forget everything you were taught and revisit how do you now make with a living creature, you know, and such an intelligent living creature as well. So sorry, I got completely carried on there.
It's an exciting. It's easy to do that. And Rachel,
yeah, no, absolutely.
Pardon, sorry.
And Rachel, what are your thoughts? What surprised you most about working with fungi as a medium?
I think the different surface textures, just from a sort of surface texture point of view, the different surface textures you can get from a really small change. It's really hard to keep track of what makes what happen when you start experimenting, and yeah, it just, I don't know, it sounds a bit lame almost, but it gets more and more exciting, just like seeing how the texture of mycelium on a small mold I'm making changes over the 3 days. I can't wait to go and check them every day. It's ridiculous.
So for you, it's very much the morphological nature, the fact that you're working with something that it's not static, it's actually evolving, it's changing, it's adapting to its environment. And you know, one of the things that we chatted about with the founders of Full Grown was the fact that essentially you're not so much even curating the process of the growth. What you're doing is you're creating the conditions And when you really understand those conditions, you have some idea, but not necessarily a flawless idea of quite how this organism is going to grow. So you know, in some ways, you know, that is completely different to historical design, isn't it? Because, you know, you were saying, Oksana, about, it was Kingston you studied at, wasn't it? Was it Kingston?
Kingston School of Art, yeah.
Kingston, fellow Kingston. I did a postgrad there as well. So, yeah, I know it's got a very, very strong reputation for sustainability. You know, historically, when you worked as a designer, you would actually have, as it were, a schema in mind. You would have almost a blueprint. You would see exactly what it was that you wanted at the end of it, even if you went through quite a you know, involved process to get to that point. Whereas with this, you have to keep an open mind, don't you? I mean, it sounds like, you know, you're really having to not have a defined outcome, but actually know the qualities of that outcome. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I meant, exactly that. So we need to, what it demands from you is that sensitivity and a different mindset, where before, or traditional, I guess, manufacturing design for production techniques, they're so precise. I mean, with materials like plastics, with materials like metals and timber, and it's so precise. You can guarantee the outcome, right? With the tooling as well. Whereas this is not your plastic, it's not your steel, it's nothing like it, and so you can't possibly start working with it with the same kind of, you know, mindset that you would with other materials. So yeah, definitely. And but that's exciting. I don't see that as a negative personally. I think it's the most exciting thing, because for a designer, for even selfish reasons, you know, it's an opportunity to do it differently, to almost have not precision in mind or a guaranteed result, but instead, I'm not sure, like perhaps an idea of a function, or yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, the mindset has to be different for sure. Otherwise, it won't work, and you will be disappointed. So
yeah. I mean, one thing that Nancy Dinas was saying, you know, we were talking in one of the earlier sessions about the fact that when you work in this domain, there is a very strong crossover with science, and science, you know, you are in effect experimenting a lot, aren't you? Because you can't assume that your materials are going to work in a particular way. So you've got to tinker, you've got to experiment. I know over at Biohm, you have a really impressive research process, and you're constantly exploring how the different organisms work. You're effectively creating fungal cocktails, I describe it materially, and that you're sort of tweaking. You know, how many different strains of fungi and how many different conditions have you experimented with, sort of in tens or hundreds, or, you know, to give us an idea of the level of experimentation that's going on there?
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're lucky. We have an incredibly talented team, and it consists of biologists and chemists and biochemists and bioengineers. So in terms of strains, I would say it's in hundreds. So we have a library at our research headquarters in Bermondsey, library of strains, and a luxury of having access to the in-house infrastructure that has that allows you to work with different states of mycelium as well as a living organism, because it does come or exist or can be in different states, whether solids or liquid, and that then, you know, allows you to have infinite amount of conditions as well. So yeah, it's constant tweaking. Sorry, I maybe forgot your question, but yeah, it's
So I think you've given us a scale, because you've said you're working with hundreds of different strains of fungi. Obviously, I know globally there's an excess of 5 million, aren't there? 5 million, and that is probably a very conservative estimate, because we probably haven't even discovered
exactly
a huge
exactly
number. So you're working with hundreds of strains. You're working with them in different kind of conditions, different humidity levels, temperature, and so forth.
And a lot of food, they need the waste streams as well. So we've recently launched a service package which basically allows us to test various waste streams, basically match make. And so that's kind of further multiplication of strains versus conditions versus actually nutrition that they're getting, and the matrices of nutrition, and sometimes it's a mixed cocktail of nutrition. So yeah, there's a lot of boot camping going on of strains versus waste. Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
You're essentially working out what they like to eat, and obviously in terms of what they eat, I mean, it feels to me like keeping a pet, in that the pet food that you feed your pet very much impacts on its condition, or any animal, obviously. I mean, you know, we as humans, your body is your temple and so forth. So effectively what you're trying to do is to find what it is that, you know, is the sort of body is the temple for your fungi, and so that they grow optimally. Do you find that not the diets of the fungi change not only the growth rates, but also the sort of material quality of the fungi? Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have protocols in place as well for upkeep of the strains as well. We do harvest them from the wild, but there is a process of where you jumpstart the strain, or you clean it up as well. And sometimes you kind of say it doesn't degrade, because it does degrade after some time. And then obviously we also have a skill set in the team where we're able to evolve strains as well in a natural way. So it's a directed evolution. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on for sure. And then obviously you can develop your strains, putting them through, you know, boot camps and jumping over the hoops to more efficiently or effectively digest a particular waste stream. Because the idea is to basically tap into that amazing ability of fungi to digest. It's the nature's most wonderful and most amazing digester, and so that's the idea, to use as a tool to deal with our waste problems, and they're doing great, and at the end having amazing products as well to close the loop.
And I was, you know, as you were talking about, I was thinking about the fact that, you know, one of the problems, not just with biomaterials as far as fungi is concerned, but biomaterials more generally, is the fact that obviously traditionally when you're creating a startup or any sort of innovative venture, intellectual property is a big thing, because when your investors come along, they basically want to know that what you're doing is something that they invest in it, is going to actually probably be quite difficult for someone else to copy, because obviously if any Tom, Dick or Harry could copy it, the moment that you've perfected, as it were, your recipe, it can be copied by someone who's, you know, not going to have to put in that R&D budget, that sort of initial foundation. But as you were speaking about it, it has to me a feel of almost like you're sort of creating Olympic teams, in the sense that you're working out, you're sort of training here the fungi. And so from an intellectual property perspective, or if I was an investor and I were to sit down, I think it would be very obvious to me that not everybody is going to be able to just come along and set up a sort of research lab and just suddenly start creating these fungal materials and work it all out, because this is a very involved process.
I mean, yes, but also actually our dream at Biohm is to have this technology open source, to allow for communities to benefit from this amazing technology. Whilst at the moment it's a very young industry and it's only just kind of peeking into the commerce and, you know, having a real impact and scale, I see a future. I can feel it, that we would love for this technology to be released so everybody can benefit and the impact is achieved sooner than one company or two companies can do. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it's also, yeah, and it's also maybe understanding more about, we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible, you know, and surely there are more sophisticated ways of working with this organism. So, and that's when we get to that point, it will be possible to open it up and all of us
so it's almost
can have a pet like that, maybe.
An open source, you know, it's almost like this is open source code here, that when you've actually worked all of this out, so, you know, from the perspective of sort of developing this business, obviously there are now, as it were, other companies that are basically doing some of the things you do, not necessarily in the same amalgamation, the same collection of things, but they're doing bits and pieces of what you're doing. But, you know, what you're saying is that, you know, as a company, what you're looking to do is to really work out how we optimize the growing of the fungi to make the materials we need to build our sustainable world, and then actually look to create value in the company in other ways, and so that you can actually in effect do what an academic would do and give your learning to the world. That's the model. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, the more, you know, the more people participate in this, you know, the more biomes there are, whether, you know, following different business models, the better, right? Because the sooner we can replace synthetic materials, the sooner we can have buildings that are regenerative to occupants and natural world. And so, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not sure what the business model is going to be. I'm not sure how open source is going to work and when, but it's the idea and the dream to make that happen. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
That's part of your mission, the values. And Rachel, you know, I mean, something that is interesting here. I mean, when I first came across Biohm, it was at the City X conference, and I remember we met because you had a beautiful stall there, and you had a number of the products you were developing on display. And one of the things we had a chat about was the fact that, you know, the materials are absolutely beautiful. They really are stunning, and they really lend themselves to great design. And they're not a hard sell in that historically, if I'm to be really frank, a number of people in the sort of the wider design community thought about sustainable design as somehow being suboptimal. It somehow wasn't beautiful. But the materials that you've developed are really beautiful. And obviously now you've created the wonderful range of lampshades I've seen, among other physical sort of uses of the materials that you're developing. And obviously, Rachel, in your work, the urban fungarium, you know, when I saw that, my first thought was, you know, this is a really beautiful object. This is a stunning piece that could easily feature in any of the sort of premium lifestyle magazines internationally. For you as a designer, you know, how do you see fungi, as it were, being expressed in the home? Obviously, you've designed one piece. Well, obviously, you will be working on a number, but, you know, what's your vision here for fungi design products in and around the home and beyond?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think that I want other people to share my passion for growing mushrooms, because I know cultivating things is good for you. Everyone knows that getting out into the garden is important and good for you, and you know, connecting with nature is important. And then you get to not only look at them as they're growing, you get the satisfaction of eating them. They're delicious, they're nutritious. Some of them look quite, you know, striking. But I think, yeah, I think I would like it if home growers were able to use reusable materials to grow mushrooms, because you can grow mushrooms. My brother kindly gave me some wine cap mushrooms and we have them in the garden. But trying to grow mushrooms from a kit at home, often you have lots of single-use plastic, and you have to have these plastic bags that come in the post, and that's just such a shame. It's so unnecessary, because, as Oksana said, mushrooms are, or fungi are, the primary decomposers. So, and they can use things like coffee grounds, or they can use cardboard, and they're safe to eat because they're choosy about what they take out of the material. So you can grow these mushrooms on waste, which is perfect. I think what's the better outcome? And then you can just regenerate them and just keep them living and growing and eating them like that. I think, yeah, I think I want other people to feel passionately about them as I do. But I would love, one thing that's good is, obviously, if you go away and you've got plants at home or house plants, you sort of worry about them turning into, you know, sort of flaky messes when you come back. But mushrooms, they're also still beautiful when they're dried. So I think from a beautiful perspective, you can have urban fungariums hanging in your house, and if you left them to go away, they'd still be beautiful in the orbs. So there's sort of you know, that sort of beauty element, but also a practical element, because you can eat them and they can survive off your waste. So really, I would love every home in every urban environment to have an urban fungarium, and any cafe to have urban fungariums hanging that they could pick and use it in their cooking. That would be really cool. But But I've been recently in an exhibition I was in Norfolk. I had a go with some hard micromaterials similar to the ones Biohm use, using hemp waste and mycelium, and I really enjoyed sort of seeing the patterns that mushrooms can make in any shape that you put them in. So that was really eye-opening, and I definitely want to do more of that, because as Oksana was saying, they're, you know, totally non-toxic and totally compostable and edible, as Ashley said of Oslo Studios. But yeah, I just think they're great, and I definitely want to do a bit more work in interiors and incorporating mushrooms in sort of more artistic ways, definitely.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, I can really see your vision, because I think what's great about it is that the urban fungarium is a beautiful object, and obviously it's got those properties that we've spoken to, of the fact it's evolving. I know certainly when I've looked at mushrooms growing in the wild, they grow incredibly quickly, don't they? And then they can actually, I mean, if it was, for example, chicken of the woods, that sort of delicacy of Croatia, it grows incredibly quickly, and then it will effectively reach maturity, and then it will just sort of very quickly demise. And so you've got this sort of wonderful morphology of the fungi, but the fact that, you know, you are thinking about this in a truly systemic way, in that you're thinking of it as a food source, but you're also thinking about the fact that this is effectively a form of composting. Yep. And just thinking about this beautiful system. So although obviously your first urban fungarium is it reminds me very much of the sort of the kind of 70s lounge feel with the macrame and what have you there. So I can see that there being many different configurations of that. What are your thoughts, Oksana? I mean, this, again, it's totally feeding into the sort of things that you're looking at as a company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it makes sense, doesn't it? It's in terms of interior use, for instance, the core product for Biohm is insulation panel, just because it's not only beautiful, the mycelium composite materials are extremely functionable. So in terms of their performance, so they're incredibly insulating, thermal insulating as well as acoustic insulating. So that's the main one for us, but we have been expanding our product portfolio. Like you've mentioned, Melissa, we released lampshades, but this year, actually, maybe I can do a little special announcement. Which
yeah, that'd be great, and exclusive.
Exclusive, nobody knows. But yeah, we next week we're launching acoustic, architectural acoustic panels. Today, actually, I spent the whole day photo shooting them, so it's very exciting. But this is an interior product. If insulation is inside the walls, it makes up the main body of the fabric of the building. This one is on the internal skin, and it's beautiful. I mean, we've tested it before. For instance, for the volatile organic compounds, VOCs, it achieved A+, something that is unheard of for construction and built materials. So, I mean, yeah, and I guess from then on, after that product, we're going to keep on expanding, because it just makes sense, from furniture to interior architectural elements to then insulation inside our walls and whatnot. I would build a house in the world out of mycelium materials. They are just gorgeous.
Yeah, you totally could as well. It's amazing, because like you could even make them movable or transportable, and because they're so light, it's cool. I'm kind of picturing myself in a movable igloo moving around Wales and the wider British Isles.
You know what? Today I experienced the igloo from the inside, because at the photo shoot we built a set, so we had a room, so we actually paneled 2 walls with acoustic panels, and the kind of sense you get, we were just drawn to that corner and that wall. It's just, there's something in it, and it almost had actually the surface is left natural, so and it just ended up being cosmic in a way. I don't know, it's almost constellations you can see in the surfacing. You'll see next week, but yeah, there's something that draws. I don't know, maybe we are programmed. We are, right? That's the biophilic design,
of course.
Yeah, exactly. So we are programmed to be drawn to that, and even though it's still people react in different ways because it's still really unusual, yet we are programmed to really like it. So it makes sense to be in our interiors. It's healthy, it's regenerative, it deals with our waste streams.
Yep. Yeah. And it's
a no-brainer.
There's fire retardants is a property of a number of fungal strains, isn't it? I know you've done some fire testing over at Biohm. How, in the fire testing, how fireproof are the materials? I mean, I've seen some pretty impressive tests, but give those that are tuning in an idea of how fire retardant they are.
Yeah, so Maycelium, it contains a compound called chitin, which is basically the same compound that you can find in exoskeletons of crabs and shellfish. And as a compound, it's a fire retardant compound. But I guess when you have a material, though, like if it's not 100% mycelium biomass, then it can be flammable just because there is a lot of carbon in it, and anything that is carbon will combust. So it
has some properties, but probably you could, if the fire retardant component of it was extracted, that could potentially be applied as some sort of fire retardants on the exterior, do you think, for example, on your insulation panels? I mean, what I'm thinking of here is that, for example, if you think about music recording studios, a lot of the historical materials that have been used in sound insulation are actually very flammable. They are completely petrochemical, so they're bad on every level. They're ticking all the wrong boxes. But presumably, you might be able to work with that in advance. So just because obviously now we're a lot more aware of the fire risk. So if there is a natural property in there, then maybe thinking about coatings and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're on the right track of thinking, Melissa, there. And yes, we are looking into that for sure, because for us, for us, the mission is to find a solution to all this compliance and health regulations, which have to be stringent, as you mentioned. It's a big problem, and it just has to perform, especially if you're attaching it to the wall or it sits inside the wall. But if we can solve fire retardancy with looking at the biomimetics, whether it's through biochemistry, like you're saying, looking into coating it with the compound that the mushrooms or mycelium has in it, and harvesting that and then potentially reapplying it somewhere else. So that one thing, and then there are other ones, whether I can't think of the top of my head, but yeah, it's looking at nature for solutions of how nature deals with fire and protects how different organisms and plants protect themselves from fires. And Melissa, actually, that's your. I remember you did a talk on fire and how regenerative and how nature uses that to flush itself, and it's interesting. So maybe.
Yeah. Well, I know there's definitely a use, because actually Dr. Jodie Bernhardt, who is one of the experts in eco-literacy, she was recently insulating her flat, and she'd been down to the DIY store and she tried to find a sustainable material and one that she could put on herself, because it wasn't just the fact that the cost of actually getting someone to do it, to put in the insulation on the walls, was not only going to be incredibly expensive, but because of the labour shortages, it was, how long is a piece of string in terms of actually getting the fitting done. So she'd been out and she bought a load of materials, but they were highly, highly unsustainable and actually a massive fire risk. And so that was something I flagged with Dr. Richard Miller of Innovate UK and Dr. Mike Pitts, because this is a really important issue, because obviously now we've got the problem with the energy fuel crisis and the fact that energy prices are rising. People need better insulated homes, but if their only option is to put in highly flammable materials that, though lowering their heating costs, are then going to make their home combustible, it's really not ideal. So I think there's a clear market opportunity here, and I think the fact there is an innate fire retardants within fungi, and obviously you've identified the compound that makes that quality, then certainly I think that this is something I will definitely be pushing for.
No, absolutely, Melissa. But that's
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but that's why for us it's a core product, because the problem is huge, like you say, the energy prices are rising, the lot of it, and the fact that the traditional products on the market highly flammable, extremely toxic, and do not have a afterlife. You know, the huge waste as well that is impossible to deal with. But yeah, so that's for us, that's the most impactful product. And the flammability, I guess one of the natural ones is if you look at the minerals and aggregates as well, although they are not bio-based, they're not synthetic either, they're natural, and they're non-combustible, for instance. So it could be as simple as that, but it could obviously be much more sophisticated too. But I think it's a matter of time. The technology is there and it will be better, and the scale is almost there. So just give it a bit of more time and we will insulate homes with mycelium.
Brilliant. So we've essentially, fungi has got obviously applications aesthetic, it's got applications that are practical. I mean, the incredible thing about fungi is it's not only one of the most ancient organisms, but it's also just incredibly diverse. What are some of the more out there ideas you have about how we might integrate fungi into our future homes and our future society? What's the outer, Rachel, what's your outer periphery of vision here?
Well, I've already alluded to my igloo, my movable igloo.
Or igloo, yeah.
But yes, all my out there kind of ideas. I mean, from a recording studio perspective, I sometimes spend my time in recording studios.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, the idea of having my harp in a sound insulated, acoustically room in someone's basement when there's a fire doesn't really appeal. So if that was fire retardant, that would be great. So that would be amazing.
What about the fact there was one of the Professor Andrew Adamansky, sorry, his name is very unpronounceable and I'm awful at pronouncing words, but the researcher of fungi architecture, one of the breakthroughs that his team was partly involved with was the fact they've identified that fungi have a language with at least 50 words as we would know them. So yeah. In other words, we've decrypted the fact that fungi have a language, kind of very Avatar. I'm thinking it's like, you know, in James Cameron's Vision, which was actually from the Kayapo tribes of the Amazon, where, you know, you've got the root systems of the tree of life essentially are talking, and the native peoples, the Navi, you know, they're tuned into this. Can you sort of see that in some way being integrated? I mean, what I'm kind of thinking here is if we think
Computing.
to biosensing, in the biosensing community, we've not only come to recognize that plants have signals that effectively let you know if there are threats, basically, and if it's a good or bad environment, but they can actually now decrypt if the signal that the plant is sending electrically is conveying that there is a drought, or there is, you know, that they've identified the particular, as it were, words that plants are using to convey a threat across their network, across their root systems, and throughout the material, you know, the sort of material structure of the plant. Can you see that being integrated in some way? I mean, as a musician, you know, what are your thoughts on the fact that fungi have their own language?
Yeah, amazing. It's unreal. It's amazing. I think there's a fantastic artist and musician who kind of channels waves from mushrooms and plants and then turns it into music. Wow. He's fantastic. I can't remember what his name is though. That's a shame. Oh, Michael Prime. Yeah, Michael Prime. And he was on Countryfile a couple of months ago, basically doing just that. And I think a bee landed on one of the mushrooms he was filming, and the waves started changing. So that was pretty amazing. So yeah, that would be cool. One thing that I am sort of thinking about connecting, and as you said, sort of pathways, that kind of thing. I think I'm a Green Party councillor for my parish council. And one of the ideas I had initially when I was experimenting with Petalotioptis microspora. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's the mushroom that breaks down plastic. And just a vision I had was connecting up parish councils near me and having some sort of community compost that had Petalotiopsis microspora breaking down everyone's plastic compost, which is a very far away dream that I think would be absolutely amazing. If it was possible, I don't know. And
Sounds brilliant. What do you think of that, Oksana?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we are looking into as well, Rachel, the microremediation. So the plastic microremediation. We had a grant from Waitress and Partners to focus on that a year or so ago. And yeah, exactly. And the outcome of that might not be materials, but it will be harvestable enzymes potentially for drug discovery in pharmaceutical industry. So there will be many other outcomes outside of building and design and making, which is really exciting. Again, dealing with something that's so toxic, with the help of fungi coming out with something that's so valuable, to then, and nurture and make us all feel better and fight the diseases. So that's one. Melissa, I think your point is really interesting because this organism is so incredibly intelligent, and because of its ability to communicate, that they actually say that a lot of plants tap into the mycelium networks to exchange signals and, nutrients, and it's the, the wood wide web, right? Yes.
That's right.
So, and I think tapping into that ability of signaling, that kind of intelligence and cross-species intelligence as well. So I think we could allow it to lead us in the way that we potentially design our computers, the way we potentially design systems, from across many industries. So I would imagine maybe that's at the heart of your biocomputing in the future, potentially, that model of cross-species communication channels, sensors and that intelligence.
Yeah, I can tell you that at Microsoft and a number of the other major software developers and tech companies, they are doing some very interesting work with living systems, both biosensors, with DNA storage. In case, for those that don't know about the potential DNA storage, the entire Encyclopedia Britannica has been stored in DNA, among many other tomes. So, we are now at the point at which we can not only interpret signals across the environment, we can actually process those signals, we can decrypt them, we can process them, and we can do so at absolutely phenomenal scale. So it's actually mind-blowing. This is also new. These are breakthroughs of the last really sort of 7 years. And one of the things that I'm hoping, because you probably know about the Peter Gabriel Vincent Cerf project, the Interspecies web. Do you know about that project? Where they're basically they've been looking at macro species and kind of how they communicate. And kind of one of the points that I have I've sent them a letter to say, look, where are you integrating the microorganisms into this? Because obviously when you're looking at interspecies communication, it's working as this whole connected system. And as you say, Oksana, the fungi are really foundational in that system. Certainly for plants, they're reading these signals, they're understanding what is going on. And so, what is happening with that? Because it is really mind-blowing, and it's important, and it's probably, of all the areas of sort of microorganism development, this is the one where we're not just seeing a few breakthroughs, we're seeing many come through. This last 12 months we've seen some really radical and mind-blowing scientific discoveries that we can't even really kind of get our heads around yet, let alone as designers think, well, what are we going to do with this?
No, absolutely. And I think, looking into the age of potentially colonization of other planets, for instance, as well, and the kind of communication that we might be looking at there, but also settlements as well. So, yeah, and like you said, I mean, that in nature things are so far more sensitive, and the feedback loops are far more quicker, and and work on so many different levels that our technology and our feedback loops are not there yet. And I think Maycelium would hold a lot of answers for us to, you know, but yeah.
I must admit,
So.
I've used your company as an example of one of the best in breeds when I've given a number of talks, advisories on really what's happening in this sector. And one of the things that blows people's minds is the fact that you are actually in the process down in, is it Somerset or North Devon? You've got your factory, your former print works. How is that going, Oksana? How is that coming along?
Yeah, no, so that was a project with the social enterprise called Dartmoor Collective in Somerset, you're right, in a lovely town called Watchet. And the project was to basically set up a demonstration facility in collaboration with the community and to scale the technology, you know, because at that time anyway, nobody was growing full-size insulation panels. And so that was it. So we spent around 2 years, I think, working on that. And apart from just building a demonstration facility, we picked one of the most challenging places as well, as in that, sorry, the oh god, the paper mill. Sorry, I lost the word completely. It was a massive paper mill there, a factory which closed down suddenly, and so the building, most of the site was completely demolished. There was a couple of buildings remaining, and they were in a very poor condition. So, but we thought, you know, this is fine, we can deal with that. So we were dealing with the degraded building and trying to build a highly sophisticated way of, you know, working with a living organism. So there were quite a few wars happening, but it went really well. So we proved the point. There was a great pilot demonstration facility for the process of growing insulation panels. But that project, that was the end of it. So that was the result, and that was the aim of it. And it was incredible. And we had the most amazing support from the local community as well. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So, and from that, you know, when you think forward, so as we think to the coming years and decades and how the potential of this is going to scale, you know, how we're going to see many, many more buildings with insulation panels made of fungi and urban fungariums and furniture made of fungi. Thinking about it, you know, is your vision, and this is to both of you, for, if you like, an ecosystem of different facilities where we've got things happening at different scales? Or do you think that the fact that fungi does require of this expertise to know how to nurture it and basically grow it, and so that it's viable as a material within the sort of these various different products? Or, you know, do you see it at that sort of factory, industrial scale, or do you see something else? What's your vision for the scaling?
I think it depends on whether it's a short-term future or long-term. I think in the long term, I'm not sure if you know Rachel Armstrong,
I
but
know,
she's very,
yeah.
so I'm with her in the sense of, you know, a world of soft architecture and grown architecture, and where we grow our buildings and the seeds are programmable, you know, from your genome and biological point of view to then as the way you would work with it as designer or architect and the rest of it. So that's the bright future I look forward to, but I think that's not going to happen anytime soon, not in the next, maybe, I'm not sure. But yeah, I see that's maybe a long-term vision and the future. In the short term, I think there has to be a transition period. You know, we do have a very strong, you know, the last 100 years or over 100 years of industrial revolution and the processes that are all around synthetic materials. And so I think at the moment we are in that transition period of trying to build the bridge between the old world and the new world, and, you know, adopting what's already out there, which is the right way to do it. You know, otherwise it's going to be a lot of waste, and then slowly changing it into programmable seeds and mycelial networks that grow our buildings. So that's the thing. That's how I would see it, I think.
So in the long-term future, you see it as being something that effectively involves us curating an ecosystem, almost.
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
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 Or like
yeah.
that, or almost like gardening in a sense, because obviously you are working with seeds and you are creating this vision. You know, it's not wild in the sense you need these seeds to perform.
No, you model it. Yeah, exactly. There's hopefully we'll reach the point where we have the kind of systems and computing that allows us to program and envision. Nowadays it's all in CAD modeling, but in the future hopefully it's the modeling of gardens, of buildings, you know, and then you can probably understand what environments you need to set for the different species to grow X, Y, and Z, and build that, and actually see the whole process of growth, and then understand what you're missing. Or oh god, I would love that program right now.
I mean, if you look at where artificial intelligence is now, so long as, you know, the more information that you put into an artificial intelligence system, the more accurate the model is. And I would say, if an analogy would be that in Earth system science, you know, when modeling things like how a storm system is going to develop, or, I mean, we're not really there. Wildfire is very, very complex because it doesn't just, it's not just curated by the wind or by the topography or by the biomass even, it actually generates its own physics. So, you know, we're sort of probably about 20 years off really being able to model that well, but we can already model a storm system pretty well. We can already model the weather pretty well. So, I mean, I think in terms of, you know, certainly being able to model a simple fungal system, I think with the right tech team, you could use current artificial intelligence and computing programs to get a pretty good idea and to put in the disruptors. And certainly, you know, because effectively your knowledge that you're developing a biome would shape the algorithm. That would actually define.
Melissa, exactly. Isn't that exciting? I mean, this is, yeah, exactly that. And I think with the help of obviously AI, you could shorten the time that we, you know, that it would take us to get there, like you're saying.
I'm thinking
it's not far off.
Yeah, I'm thinking some matchmaking. It's all about relationships here, and I'm thinking, got to join those dots together. So, you know, one of the things, everything comes with a risk, and fungi can be this incredible agent for good, but also there are a number of fungal strains that are dangerous, and obviously all fungal strains are evolving. How in your work do you effectively ensure that you are working with fungal strains that are going to remain safe to humans? What sort of steps do you take?
So first off is working with local species. So something that is not a species that can potentially pose a threat to the ecosystems that are local. So keeping it geographically aligned for that reason. For the second reason, I mean, like we said, it is a very engineered, the production process is highly engineered in terms of the environment at the production. So just on its own, mycelium will, you know, it's very intimate, it likes its darkness, it likes its conditions. So, and once it's grown and is a material or an object or a product, it is then inert. So there is a process of very ethically killing the organism, so it's no longer alive, and for that the reason is not threatening to the environment.
Brilliant.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and I think it's really important because, again, you know, it's one of these things that you know, people can assume, oh well, you know, you can get these home packs of mushrooms and, you know, you can set this up, but actually there is you know, an inherent responsibility because you are working with living organisms. And I think it's, you know, to hear that you're keeping the organisms native, as it were. You're not introducing these alien species, because obviously another thing about fungi is that when it breeds, as it were, when it reproduces, those spores, they can go all over the place, can't they?
But you know that in history, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the book just because my memory is terrible for names. There's a brilliant book, and it describes the journey of a species actually across the world, because whether you want it or not, and spores are in the air, there's millions of them, you would bring them, and people have. So as people traveled across continents and across borders, they have brought species from abroad. So, and that's natural. In nature that happens. And it's not just mushrooms that travel on the soles of our shoes. It's a lot of other species and organisms, from bacteria to viruses, that can have a negative impact to actually animals as well. So I guess it's the way, maybe if you look at it, if you really zoom out and look at ecosystems, you know, when an intruder comes in, it could disrupt systems, but it also could test its adaptability, its agility, you know, and it's I guess ecosystems are very intelligent. They do have a way of balancing. That's not to say that we should, you know, unintentionally and disrespectfully introduce these things, but even if it does, it happens in nature, and nature has been dealing with this kind of things for centuries.
And as you say, you know, fungi is one of the most transportable, as with microorganisms generally.
Yeah.
And what about you, Rachel? What sort of steps do you take to, as it were, ensure the safety of the fungi that you're working with?
Like local strains. So in the past, I found a big clump of oyster mushrooms that were growing on a wood stump, and then made a homemade petri dish of that, and then put it in a pressure cooker and done it that way, and then use that strain to grow mushrooms, that sort of thing. And then if there's any mold, if I had a moldy petri dish, I'd put it in the pressure cooker and then kind of cook it for 3 hours and get rid that way.
Right.
Such an amazing, interesting conversation. I was thinking, the British Mycological Society had a talk on pathogens. Pathogens is the right word? No, bacteria and fungi that had been taken over, and they could track where people had gone across the world by the mushrooms and the fungus that were cropping up in different places and causing all these issues in crop yields and that kind of thing. It's fascinating. And the different fungus that were coming, basically just flying, was a really making that such a big deal. But yeah, so interesting. Really.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, you know, just like we track migratory birds or invasive generally, they're now microorganisms. That's fantastic. I'd love to see more on that project, actually. So just a couple more questions, because we are nearly at our time now. Let's see. So I think we'll go to, if anyone who's watching has got any questions, by the way, just write them in the comment box and we will fit them in. So, ladies, the year is 2050. I'm giving quite a specific date here. What does the biomaterialized, fungi-enabled world look and feel like?
For me, sorry, Rachel. Yeah, for me, I guess I've already mentioned that. For me, it's the growing structures, but not just fungal, other plant species and other yeasts and other living organisms. I imagine there is a tribe in North India called Khasi, and they have been for centuries working with a type of gum tree and the roots of the tree to build bridges. I don't know if you have seen them, but they to me are one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen, and extremely intelligent as well. So they call it low tech, but to me it's high tech because it requires the kind of intelligence that is not maybe seen in our society or industry at the moment. So that's that, plus the fungal, plus maybe some computing and maybe other structures other than bridges. That to me is year 2050. That's how it looks like.
And you, Rachel?
Grown.
I think we'll see loads of innovative, amazing things that we haven't even heard of yet, like things like mycelium and seaweed farms. I think we'll see lots of seaweed farms, and I think we'll see amazing ways and closed circular loops to deal with the rubbish that we're making right now still. So remediation, you know, what's it called? Phytoremediation for using hydroponics and cleaning air in cities, I think we'll see. And then microremediation and that sort of thing. And soil regeneration with that sort of bioremediation. I think we'll see, hopefully. But yeah, lots of different materials, I think, for like a.
So, and you know, again, we were talking about fungi as effectively a means of helping to address the energy crisis through obviously insulation. But what your work really highlights, Rachel, is fungi by means of helping address food security, isn't it? Because, you know, and, you know, we've seen a lot of indoor, as it were, sort of vertical salad farms and herbs and whatnot. But now your work is making me think of the sort of the future kitchen with the urban fungarium, every home.
But you know what? This is going to be a massive need. Obviously, the food scarcity is going to be, and you know, it's going to be right there. We will need to grow food in our urban environments, and, you know, because soils are depleted. So, Rachel, you're onto it for sure. I can totally imagine that. I think we'll all have urban fungariums in our kitchen.
I hope so, yeah. But then we'll also definitely have that need to try and fix the soils that we are damaging now.
Of course.
I think they'll have to go in hand. Yeah. We can't live off mushrooms. I mean, I'd like to.
No. And just on that, you know, so how easy would you say, compared to, let's say, growing salad or herbs indoors, how easy is growing your own fungarium?
Sometimes I put sort of microgreens in with the mushrooms. And that's quite fun to watch, because occasionally the mycelium will eat them. But sometimes you'll get a bit of cress and a bit of mushroom at the same time. So that's a good sandwich, a good breakfast. But yeah, easy, really easy.
Really easy, fantastic. So even if you're really bad at keeping houseplants, you might just be able to keep an urban fungarium.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll love it so much that you won't forget about it. You'll keep spraying it.
And it will look brilliant, because oyster mushrooms, as you say, just look sculptural, don't they? Look really beautiful to look at. So your last question, ladies, or at least from me, as I said again to the audience, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. So each of you has got one wish. If a genie popped out of a magical lamp or a test tube or a lab, or even out of your urban fungarium, and granted you one wish for the biofuture, what would it be? It can be for you personally or for society, anything.
I think I would like a magic genie to scoop up all the microplastics and all the water systems we have, and then somehow turn them into something useful, like an amazing fertilizer, so we don't have to dig up peat bogs, or something like that.
Brilliant.
Or something to repair damaged soil. Yeah, that's what I'd like.
Yeah, brilliant. And what about you, Oksana?
Oh, guys, I'm really sorry, but that question actually made me a little sad, in a way that obviously the challenges are so huge, and, you know, the hope for people, especially like myself, I guess, staff, trying to solve these day to day and dedicating their lives to it. There's still a lot of pessimism maybe about actually how bright our future can be, because the change or the impact is irreversible. So even if we do the best, everything that we need to do, the future is not going to be the way the world is now. So I guess that kind of was down on me, that kind of thing. And I guess if there was a genie, I wish, I would have wished for people to be aware of what's really happened, because I mean, it needs to be much deeper. And I think once we are, all of us collectively together, then you know, we'll be able, with our genie, to do the rest. But it's this awareness I think I would wish for, because it requires every single one of us, you know, to do anything that we can, from as a consumer, or as a designer, you know, as a politician, as anybody in as a part of the society. So I wish they would drop that genie would drop that kind of desire,
awareness.
And
that is critical, because, you know, we can't wish for things that we don't yet even have a vision for, that we're not yet even aware of. So, and you understand the problem, but, you know, it is a balance, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, the realities of the environmental and the social challenges we face are, when you really get into them, extremely scary, and the trajectories best and worst case, again, are very scary. But the fact is, there are a huge number of amazing projects, people, companies, research labs, and so forth, that really are doing things that are so incredible that if the wider public knew about these things, it would inspire them. And particularly, obviously, when you've got things that like your urban fungarium and your work over at Biohm, from your very practical things like the insulation panels to the gorgeous lampshades and so forth, that these are not just addressing the biggest issues of our time. They are absolutely beautiful. They really are things that would enrich your home. You were saying about the fact that the sort of quality of the sound panels you've got, they are organic, they are interesting, because the inherent property of the material is not ubiquitous, it's not lateral, it has these constellations. But actually within, if you look to the design community as a whole, we're seeing that quality is now, it's not just an emerging trend, but it's actually a very strong trend. So the return to obviously a lot of natural materials, wood, to biophilia, to plants, to sort of concrete walls, and the sort of the narrative, if you like, of Japan, of the sort of the things that might be damaged, or they might be a little bit unusual looking, but it's moving away from the sort of the industrialized and the very linear aesthetic of the 20th century. This is in effect the opposite of modernism. But ironically, although it's sort of very now and it's emerging, and it's only enabled by these new insights and design, the sort of design directions, this is drawing on, as you were saying, these ancient practices, the living root bridges of India, and the fact that peoples around the world have obviously worked with nature. You mentioned low tech. Obviously, there's Julia Watson's book, which is just divine, and has the fantastic pieces in it. So it is really important. So that's one of the reasons I've put this series together, is so that the people that like you, that are really working on these great ideas, we get some extra visibility, we get that conversation. So to the audience, have you any questions? Do put them in, or if you don't think of them now, then just put them in the DMs and we can come back to them. And also know that the question of what do you feel the biomaterialized world will look and feel like by 2050? And if you had one wish, also send in your thoughts, because I'm going to be compiling these with all of the thoughts that come from everyone in this series, and we will put them together, and so that we have a collective vision of this is how we hope, we think our future world could be, based on all the exciting work that we're doing. Brilliant. Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. I hope that we will have another opportunity, hopefully in person somewhere in London at an event. But really, well done to both of you, because you've both recently, I know that you've both had a number of exhibitions and other achievements, that they're born of a lot of hard work, and they really show you to be, true pioneers in your field and doing work that lots of people need to know about. So thank you for giving the time today, and yeah, I hope to work on something else with you soon.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.